Welcome to the Space for Grace podcast, a place where you can come as you are, hear genuine conversations about women's holistic health, and leave educated, inspired, and encouraged about your health and fitness journey. Get ready to find freedom to flourish in your physical, mental, and spiritual health. I'm your host, MK, and I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to the Space for Grace. Hey guys, welcome back to the Space for Grace podcast. Today we have guest speaker Logan Wade. Coming from his own experience with chronic illness, Lyme disease, chronic fatigue, and fibromyalgia, Logan has a passion for complex chronic conditions and the stories of those behind them. Working from a bio-individual approach, he aims to draw on his knowledge to better empower others in navigating their own wellness journeys. Logan is the founder of wellandwhole.org, a place for integrative nutrition, health, and wellness coaching. Welcome, Logan. Glad you're here.
Thanks for having me, Madison. Happy to be here.
Of course. Super cool how we connected. So we can tell the audience that we are both in the integrative nutrition health coach course together, becoming
Yeah.
health coach certified. And you are graduating pretty soon, right?
Yeah, I'm part of the March group, which I think you're a little bit ahead of us, but we still got to connect through one of the coaching circles, I believe.
Yeah. So that was a super cool way to meet. And I don't meet a lot of males typically in my kind of space doing a lot of holistic health coaching with a lot of women. So it's really cool to get a guy's perspective, especially someone like you who has kind of a story and a history with dealing with chronic conditions yourself and kind of finding your passion for holistic health through your own experience, like many of us do. But I'm excited to hear your story today and a little bit of just a guy's perspective on holistic health. I don't feel like it's talked about very often. But guys have, health issues too, and that's super important. So, I'm excited to dig in. And why don't you just start by sharing a little bit about how your journey into holistic health and health coaching started?
So we could go back to, I guess, when my health journey started, if you will, which was sort of the genesis for where we are now. In the end of the summer of 2019, I had a weird set of symptoms start, and like a normal typical illness, you kind of expect it to get better within 7 to 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, and it wasn't getting better, and things were getting worse, and it was a really wide set of symptoms that nobody could really make sense of. Like a lot of people with complex chronic conditions, they often get told like your blood works fine, like you look healthy. Maybe it's in your head. You go to your typical, PCP visit, do your typical blood work. I even had a handful of ER visits because I remember saying at that time that, essentially I just felt poisoned. There were so many different things going on that it was like, it was the only way I could explain it.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody could make sense out of that, which led into looking into more alternative spaces, holistic, naturopathic, all those different avenues that exist out there. And really through all that bouncing around, finding little things that have helped in certain areas, building on what has helped, looking to new things that I maybe haven't explored, and building on my journey that way. And I sort of found myself at a point where I was in between, regular alternative doctor appointments. So there wasn't a specific like functional or integrative doctor that I was working with. There were a couple alternative practitioners I was seeing for some more specific like technique-based approaches, but not on a routine follow-up type of situation. And that's when actually through another podcast, somebody had mentioned this program at IAN. Bit ironic now.
Mm-hmm.
And let me look into what this is about and really resonated with a lot of the core principles, philosophies, teachings, just the general structure. And, I was sort of at a place in my life where I was starting to think about, what am I going to do when this journey's over? And do I want to take what I've learned and help other people? And also thinking about, how do I get to the end of my journey or to a place of where I'm, a little bit past, feeling like I'm trying to keep my head above the water, if you will. And a few things came together, and it essentially I just couldn't see something that felt more worth doing from what I had been through.
Yeah.
And then it also felt like I could have more of the tools, in my own hands to really navigate my own health and wellness, to get to a more, ideal place, if you will.
Yeah. So many people, when they're starting to deal with chronic illness, take things into their own hands and get their own education because it is so frustrating when you're in the medical model and you're going to that doctor, that PCP or whoever, and you're not getting answers and they say, oh, everything's normal. And you know that it's not normal. Like you said, you felt poisoned. I know so many people can relate to that feeling of, I know that something is wrong and I just need help figuring out what it is and how to remove interference to let my body heal naturally. So I know you mentioned you didn't go to just one specific functional medicine doctor or naturopath or anything like that. But was there maybe one place that you did go that was the most helpful, or maybe a certain technique that was the most helpful? Like, what really helped you on your healing journey the most, do you think?
So I think the place that I found the most maybe turning point, if you will, in my journey, was with an ILADS doctor. So for those who don't know, ILADS is International Lyme and Associated Disease Society, which functions a bit outside of, sort of in our Western medicine. You think like CDC or the IDSA, which is more focused on, infectious disease specifically. Um, there's a bit of clash in how they see, tick-borne, based illnesses or, complex chronic conditions. And it was getting with an ILADS doctor out of Philadelphia that I actually got a diagnosis for Lyme disease for the first time.
Mm,
And I had done that test, and there's a few different forms out there, but I had done that test several times in the 2 years leading up to having that visit with that practitioner who ran a different lab. I believe it was IGenics that she had did. Um, and so through that, I was able to get a more specific picture on some specific infections that were going on at the time. And then through her philosophy and approach of, how people sort of improve from those type of conditions, I really resonated with a lot of that.
mm,
Unfortunately, a year into my time with said practitioner, she developed her own health crisis and had to stop her practice.
wow.
Which so I don't know if I would have gotten into health coaching had I actually finished the journey with her. Who's to say what that would have looked like?
Mm,
But I've been fortunate enough that I have worked with so many different people to have gained so many different perspectives. And that's truly what this space is, unfortunately, is that there's so many different perspectives and you really don't know what's going to work for who. And insurance
mm,
isn't going to cover much. So that's a
yeah.
nice little cherry on top.
Yeah.
As far as, some other techniques that I have found helpful, um, there's a couple doctors that do this technique known as Lyme stop, which is based off of acupuncture type meridian line principles, if you're familiar with that, as well as a form of muscle response testing. I don't want to get too into the details there because that is a little bit more on the controversial end. But it is something that I've seen some really incredible cases come out of.
Mm,
And 5 years ago, I thought it was, absolutely crazy that that was working for people. So it's really interesting to see how there is, taking the more traditional testing, but there's alternative space of that. And then there's also, even more fringe things going on, trying to help people feel better.
yeah. There's so many different things you can try. It's overwhelming and hard to know where to start. Um, a lot of times with my clients who just generally want to get healthier, it's a little bit easier to just start with the basics like good nutrition and exercise and sleep and stress management. But then when you have something like a Lyme disease diagnosis or something like that, I feel like it just makes it so much more complicated. Um, because each person is unique and individual, and there are so many different things you could try. So, what do you feel like? Like, is there things you can do with nutrition, supplements, or is it other techniques that is helpful for Lyme?
I think, I like to use the term. when I'm referring to a type of individual, if you will, is like complex chronic illness in relation to Lyme disease. Because while Lyme disease is definitely a thing, people who get Lyme from a tick, there's often more things that are going on than just Lyme, the bacteria, which is also known as Borrelia. So there's other what they call co-infections that can go along with that. And then when
Mm,
you get into the more um, chronic or like complex type situations that either didn't respond to antibiotics. And even according to the CDC, I think people who get diagnosed on time, treated on time with a recommended course of antibiotics, still go on to develop chronic symptoms 10%, 20% of the time.
mm,
Um, and according to the CDC, there's not a whole lot of info as to why those people are getting symptoms. And it's from my experience that there's often infections that are also hard to find. It's hard to know whether you fully treated the Lyme bacteria.
mm,
And it's also difficult to know, what to do with that then from there, like you're getting at with your question. And it's truly a comprehensive approach. You really have to go at it from all sides. Some people can, we're all bio individuals. Some people can find one thing that, pushes them in the right direction. Some people do take antibiotics and feel better. It
mm,
could be your nutritional status, toxin exposure, which could be, heavy metals. It could be water damage in your environment leading to mold and mycotoxin exposure.
mm,
Um, it could be genetics related. It could be, more lifestyle based, your stressors, who are the people around you, how are you approaching life? There's a term out there, Dr. Robert Navio at UCSD coined this theory, the cell danger response theory. And it's essentially that when all those stressors are influencing the body, the cell sort of shuts down, almost like when you get, think of something like the flu. You
mm,
get, extreme fatigue, you're exhausted, so your body shuts down to deal with a pending threat. And people with complex chronic conditions, you end up getting stuck in that threat. And then unwinding it is figuring out, all right, what's all going on here? And the other half of
mm,
that coin you could look at is something you could refer to as metabolic resiliency.
mm,
So think of like your ability to handle stress, your ability to handle conflict, your ability to navigate things failing in life. And all those things really add up to influence, as far as, you know, people who get bit by a tick get Lyme disease, but then never knew it, never had symptoms, never needed to do
mm.
anything. People who don't know they were bit were treated and go on to be sick for a very long time and have a really tough time navigating that. So there's really a broad spectrum of what's happening here.
Yeah, that makes sense that you want to come at it from a lot of different angles because we're kind of like that onion and you have all these different layers to peel back. It makes me really want to prioritize preventative health and like emphasize to people the healthier you can be and like the better your gut health and your immunity. And, if you're exercising and taking care of yourself before you encounter a bacteria or a virus or anything, then you are going to be able to handle that better. Someone else that I had on the podcast recently was talking about the thinking of your toxic load like a glass, and the more filled up you are with those toxins, then once the glass starts to spill over, you're going to have all these symptoms. But if we can keep like our toxic exposure low. Um, I just think that's huge in helping us build resiliency. Um, Emotional resiliency is another really interesting concept. You kind of mentioned how we handle difficulties, not just physically, but like emotional stress response. It's all so connected, which is cool. The body is so complex, but it makes it complicated sometimes for sure. And I'm curious as a guy, I didn't prep you for this question, but I'd love to hear your kind of perspective going through your own journey with all of this. Like, did you have the support you needed? What like support would have wanted like going through a chronic condition as a male? Do you feel like, it was harder to talk to friends and family about it? Um, what did that look like, and how could people support men better who are going through this kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. Something that, especially towards the latter half of my journey that I really dove a lot more into more of those, I don't know what the right word is, the kind of lifestyle patterns in a way of just how you're navigating those things, or even something that comes into my head is your personal frequency. When you look at what a frequency is, it's the rate at which something a current like moves from one end to the other. And so thinking of like how are you moving through your life? And so as far as support, I think it's very similar to a lot of other things where, some things exceeded my expectations in ways that, I couldn't have imagined they would have happened that way. And there were definitely things that happened that I still look back on sometimes and I'm like, oh, that was a really difficult circumstance. I don't know how I navigated that at that current part of my journey.
Yeah.
And it is a very difficult thing to talk about. I don't want to make any assumptions as far as the struggles that women have to deal with as far as those similar types of challenges. But definitely, I feel like as a male that there's more expectation to like deal with your feelings, or to be less emotional, or to be more of like the problem solver in it. Um,
Hmm.
and so there was that angle. And then I think also the fact that nobody really understands the nuances of these types of conditions, or if they do,
Yeah.
it's very surface level. Um, and then even then, like, after maybe like, a few weeks to a few months, even the best support can be like, we have our own lives going on,
Mm.
which is totally understandable. Um, so I think that yeah, I think like I said, it's similar to most aspects in life where certain things can surprise you and certain things you learn from. There's
Hmm.
always room for growth in it, and I look back and reflect on that a lot.
Yeah. I can relate a little bit. Like when I was first diagnosed with PCOS, I was kind of having to educate everyone constantly on what it was, educate myself on what it was and how to deal with it, and then educate like friends and family and how they could support me. And sometimes it's a long process and a long journey to get to the point where people, understand and support you. And maybe it's when you go home for Thanksgiving, there's food that you can actually eat or whatever it is. Those little things that make a big difference when you feel understood. It's really important for
And I
guys
think
as well.
sorry to interrupt you there. I
No, go
think
ahead.
one of the most sort of peculiar parts of that differentiates a journey like mine is that for so long I didn't really know what was going on.
Hmm.
When it was like I did have a Lyme test run and it was negative. And, if you compare it to something that, um, I don't know, think of any other blood test you would do for some sort of infectious disease. Like if it comes back negative, it's like, all right, well, I don't have that. With the
Hmm.
sensitivity for testing for Lyme disease, it's not very accurate. And the way that antibodies can show and the way that symptoms can show in terms of the time after you get infected, um, it almost gives you like a false sense of, oh, that's not an issue. And so
Yeah.
then you go chasing things and you're like, oh, maybe this is my thing. And so there were times where it was like, oh, this is my thing. This is what I'm dealing with. And I wasn't getting better. And it was like, well, then I got to try this thing. And then eventually you end up circling back around to other things. And so
Hmm.
that within itself was almost the most isolating part, was that like other people don't understand, but like I didn't have a clue for the longest time. And even now,
Yeah.
like just within the past couple of weeks, I've started this, we won't really get that far into it, but this mega dose thiamine protocol. And it's
Mm.
been extremely game changing for my day to day.
Wow.
And even like that, this late into my journey has been something that I was like, maybe this needs to be like a bigger topic we save for this podcast. But
Mm.
there's so much that I could get into, and I want to keep it as digestible for as many people as possible. And ultimately, I was hoping that there may be something I share today that helps somebody out there that speeds them along faster than they would have without it.
Definitely. That's awesome that you've just recently found something else that's so helpful. Um, but maybe years ago when you were earlier in the journey, maybe this specific protocol wouldn't have been as impactful back then as it is now. So you never know. It kind of changes as you go. I know that I've, at different times had different supplements that have helped more than others. And, um, when you kind of first start your chronic illness healing, a lot of times, intense exercise is the last thing that would be helpful. And you kind of have to put specific things on the back burner until later, until you're more healed. I just keep picturing that onion. It's just like one layer at a time. I think people can get really discouraged when they've been trying to work on healing something or get better for a little while and they feel like it's not progressing as quickly as they want. You have to think about the years and years and years it took to get to that point in your health. And it sometimes takes a long time to reverse years of a poor diet or and I'm not saying this was, your case at all, but I know for me with something more like PCOS or whatever, um, years of like toxic exposure or eating the regular old sad American diet or whatever. Um, if it took 20 years to get there, it could take a little while to reverse all of that. Um, so hopefully that's a little encouraging for anyone listening as well. Um, but I
I
guess
also
just
think
to go ahead.
I also think to in like a positive note on something like, what stuck out to me and you mentioned about working out. Like before this, I was somebody who was, in the gym 6 days a week. That was sort of my coping mechanism. It's kind of how I dealt with everything. It's how I made myself feel good, kept myself mentally and physically healthy. And so when this started, it was like part of my identity. I just stopped being able to do.
Mm,
And lately, I've been able to get back into the gym a little bit more and start to increasing that routine. Um, but a big aspect has been navigating those stressors, um, not being
mhm.
able to do your usual things. And
Wow.
that's something that I'm excited about for the future as far as the new tools that I've picked up. Like I don't necessarily have to be in the gym. And even now I see it as like I was in the gym a bit too much. And like I could have done this or done this a little bit different. It would have increased my social satisfaction in this area, and
Hmm.
different things like that. And I think there's also like a large portion of more like men's related issues that aren't as addressed as they could be. I feel the therapy space is there's a lot of women therapists out there, which is great to have those options, but sometimes it's nice to be like I'd like somebody who's maybe a little bit more familiar with my day to day and to
Hmm.
see a stark difference in the amount of support out there kind of makes you scratch your head a little bit.
Yeah.
And so that's something that, in my own journey, looking at, what I feel like as a guy, like what pressures we're given and what we're expected to do and who to show up as. For instance, like it's such a trendy thing to like, oh, if you're going through a breakup, get into the gym. If you're stressed, get into the gym. And then we have all these, male fitness influencers who are on, hormone therapies that don't say they're on hormone therapies, or even better, like say they don't take steroids, but like obviously are, and other people in the industry will say they are. Um,
Yeah.
there's plenty of different things that we could get into as far as, more men's issues type stuff. But that was just one example that came into my head and is something that I'm
Mm.
I'm passionate about and exploring with, myself, but also with clients in the future.
Definitely. Yeah, you reminded me, I think before I got into the holistic health world, my picture of health was someone who was just like working out all the time and looked really fit, like physically, physique wise. And sometimes those people are close to a heart attack or, they're over exercising, under eating, and chronically stressed. And one of the things that my journey has taught me is a more balanced approach to health. It's not just about working out and, counting calories and macros. It is about your hormones and your gut health and regulating your nervous system and like stress management and mental health and having a good social life, like enjoying your career and your relationships. Like it is, there's so many different aspects, kind of like the wheel of life or wheel of health that we use in IIN. There's like career, relationships, food, I don't know, all these different areas that together make up our overall health. So it's important not to just be like, especially for guys, oh, just suck it up, you'll be fine. Like just go hit the gym or I don't know what else they tell guys. to do, but I do feel like that there's still that just stigma of, you know, guys shouldn't be crying and emotional, like suck it up and just move forward. And that's so unhealthy. And your body keeps score of that and it'll come back to bite you in the butt through some sort of illness. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
love that
And
you
I
mentioned
also think
that.
there's whys behind all those decisions and like why we're making those choices and why we're doing things certain ways. And that gets
Yeah.
back to that we were talking about, which I think all taps into, metabolic flexibility, and that really ties into your ability to be healthy is directly, influenced by your ability to enjoy your life. And so it's all very connected.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that physical health and mental health. That was just such an aha moment for me in my journey of like, oh, my physical and mental health are related. They're interconnected. I can't have one without the other. Like if one is bad, then it's gonna affect the other one. So, yeah, one of the best things I ever did for my chronic health journey was get into therapy and do lots of therapy and heal from past traumas and childhood wounds and beliefs that didn't serve me anymore. Like that was an integral part of healing myself physically as well. Um, and I think that sometimes people dealing with these complex chronic illnesses or just regular chronic illnesses maybe overlook that sometimes and don't think about the aspect of emotional health and emotional resiliency and how that's affecting their physical health. But it's important.
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll just kind of wrap up on this. How does a health coach bring value to someone with a complex chronic condition similar to something you and I have gone through? And how can that help maybe skip some of the guesswork? Like you've spent years and years trying to figure out what to do and what's going on. How do you hope to help people maybe get to some answers a little bit quicker in the future?
Yeah, so as far as the type of person that someone like myself would work with, and I can see that relationship looking several different ways. For instance, um, if an initial conversation leads to an obvious like referral as far as um, you would benefit really well from possibly looking into a functional medicine doctor in your area or an integrated medicine doctor who can explore some more things that your PCP can't, and that you really haven't done any of that at all. It's probably in your best interest to get a referral for who's around you. How do you find this person? How do you choose one that's a little bit more geared towards your specific circumstance, and
Mm,
exploring that for a bit. And if that's all you need, then like I'm happy I could have helped with that. In particular, my own journey, and say in a situation where I was working with a functional medicine doctor, typically you're seeing them, what is it, once every 6 to 8 weeks, and insurance doesn't play too well with those appointments, and so they're not as budget friendly. You can kind of call and talk to the front office and get a message in, but you're really limited as far as your ongoing support in between those.
mm,
And I'm somebody who's a big believer in therapy and has regular appointments in the past. And while there are like chronic illness informed therapists, there's definitely a variety of levels of them, and it's much more often of like, oh yeah, I had one or two clients that had Lyme, and of course their circumstance probably looked totally different to what yours has looked, and they
mm,
often don't get a lot of the day-to-day frustrations, or even like the frustrations with treatment of like maybe when you are with a functional medicine doctor and you're either not resonating with something, but you sort of have to, trust in where they're taking you. Or you're thinking that I think I should try this, but they're really not, inclined to be going in that direction. And some will work with you, but I think it would have been really helpful to have somebody to really just discuss that whole process with. And,
yeah.
there were times in my journey where I could probably have talked to somebody once a week, maybe even more than that, because it was such just
Mm,
a horrible time.
yeah.
But that could look different for everybody as far as just having that one referral off of a free intro call to working together on a biweekly basis over 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. I'm excited for you to help people have that support that maybe you were missing in different parts of your journey, just to be able to relate, empathize. Um, I love that you have worked with so many different types of people that you'll know, oh, I can refer you here or here or here. Like you'll have all those referrals in your back pocket, which is super helpful. That's one of the best tools that I think we can have as coaches. But just to be able to give people that safe space to talk about what's going on, what's working, what's not working, what's frustrating, like just being able to talk to someone who gets it and who's been there is so healing, and you'll be able to lead people to their own conclusions too of like it sounds like this is what your intuition is telling you, right? And then just telling them like giving them the confidence to like go for that. Like try that thing that you're thinking about doing and then holding them accountable along the way. So I think health coaching is so helpful in that regard and so important. So I'm excited for you. I'm excited for us to graduate soon and get to help more people with their physical and their overall health. Um, so everyone be sure to check the description for how to find Logan and his website and support him on his journey. Logan, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Madison, and thanks for all you do for various communities out there of similar complex circumstances and bringing awareness to this.
Of course, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Space for Grace podcast. Be sure to check out the description for any links or resources that were mentioned during this episode. And if you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe, share with a friend, and leave a review. I hope you're leaving today educated, inspired, and ready to flourish. This is Space for Grace.